This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored in part by Allison Cook and Super Inframan. Help us out by becoming a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have back with me the Snake Brothers.
Hey.
Snake number 1 and 2.
That's right. I'm number 2 this time.
Sometimes they
I'm
switch.
Kyle.
Sometimes they
Number
switch,
1.
but you can't tell because they got masks on.
That's right. It's been a while. Thanks, Seriah. It's always great to be on your show.
It's always great to have you on the show. Yeah, it's been at least since summer.
Yeah, it has been a long time.
Well, I mean, summer's kind of almost all we have here in Texas. So.
That's right. So we're still in the ends of summer. So
Fair.
Technically, we're in the same season. Yeah.
Well, here it was 29 degrees, so
not
not summer.
Great. Yeah.
You know, we had snow this morning, so not summer.
Awesome. Yeah.
But anyway, it's been at least a few months.
Right. We've been busy.
Yes, you went to Egypt. Is that the name of the place?
Yeah, I think it's called Egypt.
And they have something
Straight
called
to pyramids.
pyramids.
Giant triangles made of stone.
That's right. Huge stone triangles in the desert. Never seen anything like it.
How weird.
Yeah. Who put those there?
So I guess your straight to pyramids scheme worked.
It worked. Yes.
Pyramid scheme.
We were extremely proud that this is people were telling us this is the one time where a pyramid scheme actually worked.
And how long have you been doing the Brothers of the Serpents podcast?
We're in our 5th year, I guess.
You guess?
So yeah, it's 4 years old, but we're in the 5th year of podcasting.
See. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, unlike you, we don't remember the exact date that we did the first episode.
Right. I'm surprised that you remember the exact date.
Look, I remember
the show.
I remember very little date-wise. For some reason, that sticks with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were coming up on, I don't know, a lot of months of doing it, and we were like, hey, we're probably getting close to a year, maybe. When did we start this thing?
Yeah, I started this January. The first airing was January 26, 2013. And that's when I was doing it live from the radio station, and I had, can't remember his name, but I can remember the damn date.
You've told us his name before. I can't remember it either. Yeah.
He did reality solved. Is that what it is? Jim Elvich. That's his name.
Jim Elvich. Right. So your inaugural show. You're coming up on another podcast birthday or anniversary.
Yes, which you guys will hopefully be a part of.
We would love to do that. Yeah. So people should look forward to that for sure, or not. Some people hate us. So. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. We can get hammered on air. It'll be great.
Jim, when I did that initially, I didn't know what this show was going to be pretty much until a week beforehand. Like if I was going to do it roundtable style or actually have guests or mix it up. And I had heard Jim on Coast to Coast, and he was a Cornell graduate. He's an engineer. And I was just like, he would be a good first guest. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And I'm like, cool, great. And then that's where it started.
Yep. Well, I've probably said this before, but your roundtable discussions, because you have done plenty of those too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, your guest interviews are always excellent, but it was really, your roundtable discussions that really were, a big part of the inspiration for me. And I talked to Kyle about this for starting the show. I was like, look, we got to be a part of these roundtable discussions. Like, how do we do that? We got to have our own show. And then we can tell Seriah, like, hey, we have a podcast. Can we come be on your roundtable, bro?
I don't remember when we did the first roundtable. I don't know if it was I think it was the second year of the show before we did an actual roundtable episode.
Yeah. I don't think I was listening all the way back then, but I was listening 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So you started having roundtables, and I was just like, these are amazing discussions, and I would love to be in on them. Because it's one of those things where, everybody knows this that listens to podcasts. You start shouting at your earbuds.
Oh, yeah.
I know the name of that place, or I want to say something right here, right? So it's just like it was a huge inspiration, and to hear it, to hear all of you, all of the podcasters out there start talking to each other was just fascinating to me. So wanted to be a part of it, and here we are.
And here you are.
That's right. And of course, a big part of it was also we wanted to travel. We wanted to go see many of these places that we have been looking at from afar, from a distance, armchair archaeology, and you want to go, right? You need to go.
Yeah.
I still feel like a perpetual noob.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why. It's like, we've been doing this for years, and it's like,
we're still noobs.
We're still noobs.
But in a way, I mean, with some of this stuff, there are no real experts. Like they're Egyptologists, but they're not looking at all the data. They're very, very, inclined to look at things one way or another. When you're dealing with the paranormal, what makes someone an expert,
Right. Yeah. Just there's...
Like, for example, I just forgot to hit record. I just hit record.
Hey, it happens to me sometimes.
All right. Welcome to our version of this show, folks. It just started.
We are 100% professionals in this industry, folks.
That's right.
Yeah, we're doing this as a swap cast.
That's right. It's a swap cast. So, thanks to Seriah for having us on his show. And Seriah, welcome to ours. For sure.
Hey, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while for you being on our show as well. That's right. And yeah, we're making fun of ourselves. Like, people know, somebody even made a meme. Snake Mo's most forgotten artifact is the record button. So we forget quite often to record.
It has definitely happened to me before.
Yeah.
At this point, I hit record before I even make the call.
Yes, that's wise.
It's like I'll just mark when it starts. I'll just hit record now because that way I can't forget later.
Right. There you go.
So you guys went to Egypt in October.
That's right. So yeah, let's discuss Egypt. First of all, traveling there was hard.
I imagine, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long way from here. 30-ish hours on planes and in airports was not fun.
I bet.
Totally worth it though, because, and this is another thing, people have asked us, like, why are these Egypt trips so long? It's like, it's just over 2 weeks, 2 weeks and a couple of days. And that's why you need to make that 30-hour trip worth it. It's 60 hours.
For us, some people that went on that trip, it wasn't very far.
I know. Yeah. I'm talking about people in the States are like, why is it so long? Well, you need 2 weeks over there if you're traveling 60 hours total, round trip to get there.
Got to make it worth it.
I mean, yeah, you got to make it worth it. And it was so amazing to actually go to a lot of these places that we've been looking at from afar for so long.
And I also think too that there's just so much there. People spend their entire lives there.
Yeah,
doing research on because there's so much underground. There's so many ancient sites, so many ruins, and I think I still feel like I guess we came back with more questions than we had when we went there.
Absolutely, that was
so.
Goal.
It's great, but the point is that to go there for just a week, the amount of stuff, things are spread out. We had to fly in an hour away from Cairo. We were on bus rides that were sometimes 3 hours, one time 4.5 hours to get to a site. I mean, these things are far away from each other, and it's all connected as well. So it's like to try to do something on a shorter trip is just, you would just be seeing such a tiny piece of a broader picture. I just think that, the more time you can spend, if you're going to do it, the better.
Yeah, and there was 4 or 5 days on a Nile cruise, so we were, the whole time, every day the boat was moving upriver, which is towards the south. So every day the boat was doing a lot of the traveling for us. So that it's just there's many miles or kilometers between each site, and it takes a long time to see everything. And of course, we didn't even come close to seeing everything. We missed a lot of things, but I have 24 tickets. That doesn't include every site we went to, because some of them didn't require tickets, or you got one ticket for a site that had multiple places. But yeah, There's just like when I got home and like spread that stack of tickets out, I was just like, wow, did we really do all of that? And yes, we did. Every day was packed full. It was planned by Ben from the Uncharted X channel, and with the Komet School over there in Egypt, which is Yusuf and his group, and they are great. I mean, they planned the trip so well. We got there. Let's see, we got there 2 days early. We had 2 days before the tour started, which Ben suggested we do, because actually Kyle and I went as guest hosts.
Oh,
yeah. So the way this happened is that Ben invited us to come on his tour.
Yeah.
To guest host.
Right. Yeah. He was saying like, hey, I'm going to have a lot of people on this tour and I could use some help, hosting and stuff. And we were like, sure, no problem. Absolutely. So it was a great opportunity and we went and got there 2 days early, like I was saying. And that gave us a couple of days to sort of acclimate, get over the jet lag, which there was some.
I'm sure.
Yeah, there was definitely some lag there. And then we got to the first, those 2 days before the tour started, we met up with Yusuf and went up to the Giza Plateau and walked around and looked at things and, sort of off schedule, just kind of looking at stuff and doing whatever. And Yusuf showed us some very interesting things. And then the tour started, everybody showed up, all the attendees arrived, and then we were off. And every day was a huge adventure, crawling through tunnels and exploring mazes beneath pyramids, and it was excellent. And of course, Ben and Yusuf were able to secure lots of special permissions, which are things that you either have to pay a lot of money for if you're doing it, by yourself,
right,
or you just can't make happen, if you don't know the right people. So we really got to do some amazing things that most people who go to Egypt as tourists don't get to do.
Well, let's talk about Giza. What are your impressions? What do you think of differently now, having been there?
Well, first of all, Giza is gigantic. We spent 3 days there total, and it's so enormous a site. The Great Pyramid by itself is between 13 and 14 acres at the base, right? So that's a lot of area.
Yeah,
and and then the second pyramid, the one in the middle that they call Khafre or Chefren, is almost as big at the base as the Great Pyramid. It's 12 acres or 13 or something like that. It's absolutely gigantic as well. And then the Menkaure pyramid, that's the smaller one, is also huge. I mean, they call it the small pyramid on Giza, but it's gigantic. They're all huge and they're far apart from each other. And we walked around there for 3 days and saw less than 10% of what's actually there, because of course the whole area has been used and reused by thousands of years of civilization.
Yeah.
So there's just tons of stuff there to see, and you can't possibly see it all. I mean, you would need to spend months just on Giza by itself, walking around every day to be able to see really everything. And the other thing about it is that the longer you're there, you realize that every stone, every block that's just lying around can tell you a story.
They're all artifacts.
Yeah, every single one of them. If you look closely enough, you start to see marks. You see interesting patterns. You see, they tell you a story because they've all been worked by human hands. Yeah. So, and then by weather and everything like that. So it's just amazing. And of course, the Sphinx is there. She's beautiful, but so modified by so many different civilizations, including the modern one, that the Sphinx is less interesting to me than a lot of the other stuff we were seeing. Well, the enclosure walls are interesting because of the erosion,
right?
Obviously, right. But the Sphinx itself, is a huge and beautiful structure, but it's heavily modified. So I don't know, but yeah, the Giza Plateau itself, walking the causeway that goes between the Sphinx area with the Valley Temple and the Sphinx Temple and the Sphinx itself up towards the center pyramid, the Khafre pyramid, that's just an amazing experience. And Yusuf was showing us areas on top of the causeway. This was really cool. He showed us areas where in between the giant blocks that make up the area of the causeway you're walking on, there are, cracks between the blocks. Mm-hmm. And some of those cracks are just dark holes. And he was like, look, you can kick sand in here and it just disappears, right? It vanishes. And he was like, when I was a boy, my father brought me here and showed me this. So I've been kicking sand in here for 40 years,
And the wind has been blowing sand across it, and it's been falling in there for
thousands of years. So there has, go ahead.
Still falling down
in there and disappearing, not filling up the cracks. So in other words, he's saying there's somewhere down there a gigantic open space beneath this causeway for all that sand to keep falling in, So that was just one of the fascinating things that he showed us, and he's showing us stuff like that every day.
Well, I mean, if there's a big open space under there, though, isn't it? No matter how big it is, it's eventually going to fill up unless that sand has somewhere to go.
Yeah,
it'll eventually fill up. Yeah, but it hasn't yet.
Right,
which suggests that's suggestive.
Somewhere down there is a huge chamber with a giant pile of sand in it.
And there are pits sunk into this plateau all over the place, and some of them are incredibly deep. Like our brightest flashlights, we couldn't see the bottom. They've got giant steel grates over them.
Yeah.
And then, the word is, they haven't fully excavated it.
So they don't know how deep.
They don't actually know how deep it goes.
Yeah.
Or they've gone down and, you hit water or something.
Right.
So it's there's just so much that's still yet to be uncovered there.
What? And in one of them, Yusuf dropped a rock down there and it was like 3 seconds before it hit the bottom. That's a long fall.
Yeah.
3 seconons.
When you're standing up next to these pyramids, the Great Pyramid or the Khafre Pyramid, when you're right next to the base, you can't see the shape of it. It's just like I've taken a lot of little short videos, like looking back and forth across, like you look at down one side and then you angle the camera up to look at the top and then angle it down to look. But when you're looking up at it, you can't tell the shape of it. That's how big it is. You can't tell that it's a pyramid when you're standing next to it. It's so freaking huge.
Yeah, they're so enormous that you can't.
The best place to observe them from up close is at the corner.
Okay.
Because there you can see this line going up, right? That gives you it gives your visual perspective the shape of the thing.
Isn't there an indent in the middle section of each one too?
Of the Great Pyramid, yeah. There's apparently it's like 8-sided. They say the core masonry has 8 sides, but that is not observable from if you're standing in the middle of it somewhere at the base. You can kind of see it by being at a corner and lining yourself up to where the corner you're at is lined up with the far corner, because you can tell that the middle blocks are further in, but it's not defined. It wouldn't be obvious to a person on the ground there that they are 8-sided.
Yeah, and remember that was first made more obvious by a photograph from above during the equinox.
Yes.
So that the shadows were perfect.
Yeah.
And then people were like, wow, it has 8 sides. Until then, it wasn't really clear that was the case. So yeah, when you're, like Kyle's saying, if you're standing next to the base of one of the pyramids and you're just in the middle of one of the sides, when you look up at it, all you see is a gigantic stairway that's basically it seems to go forever. And if you get really close, the base blocks are so tall that they just hide the rest of the pyramid from you completely. All you're looking up at is the upper edge of the first block. Or the first couple of sets of blocks.
Yeah.
So, you have to stand back to really see what they are, and the closer you get, the more strange it becomes because of the perspective and the tilt of the angle of the sides and all that stuff. It's really interesting. And there was one spot where this Khafre we were standing next to, the middle pyramid, when we were on the maybe it was the Great Pyramid, and we could hear.
Oh yeah, there's the crowds of people.
Yeah, the entire face of the pyramid was echoing the talking, and the crowd noise of everybody else on Giza was being reflected back at us at this one spot, and
it was very haunting sounding. It was really cool. You're sort of like you're lined up with the middle of the side, right? But you're back far away from the pyramid. You're like I don't know if anybody's familiar with the area. There's the basalt tiles on the ground in front of the Great Pyramid. We were standing on those basalt tiles, so probably 50 yards from the edge of the base, and the crowds all around Giza. It's like you could hear them, but they were all being sort of focused by the wall of the pyramid. And this may be due to the fact that the casing stones are gone, and so it's not reflecting it up, but you've got all these flat faces of the blocks that are actually pointing horizontal to the ground, reflecting the sound horizontally.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, it was really cool sounding.
Yeah, think about hearing, I don't know, like a big party of people all talking to each other and having fun, but you're in the back of a cave.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
That's what it sounded like. It was this faint, really cave-like sounding, haunting, bouncing off of stone kind of echo, but it was of everybody on the plateau who was talking out in front of that side of the pyramid. And you could stand there on this basalt pavement that was made, that used to be part of a temple complex, but now it's just a pavement, and you're hearing this ghostly echo of everyone else on the plateau reflecting off of the face of this huge triangle in front of you. It was really fascinating.
Also, I've been told, I've heard this in many places, that the pyramids, when they were cased, when the casing stones were still in place, that they were covered in hieroglyphs. Well, we saw mountains of casing stone blocks that had been quarried for thousands of years, lying all over. Around every pyramid that we visited, there was piles of, whether the pyramid was cased in Tura limestone or whatever, there would be piles of these remnants of the casing stones lying all around the base. And in a lot of cases, the Department of Antiquities would maybe arrange some of them or move them aside.
Right.
So they, you could go inspect the faces. And in many cases, we saw lots of casing stone faces, like the actual face of the casing stones. On the Giza Plateau, on the satellite pyramids, there were casing stones in situ, meaning they were where they originally were when the builders put them there. There were casing stones lying in rubble that had been quarried. I didn't see any hieroglyphs on any of those.
Yeah. That's right.
So I don't think if there were hieroglyphs carved onto the faces of any of the pyramids, I think that it would have been a later people that did that. Like, it was basically graffiti.
Right. So like
there was one area on the Menkaure pyramid, the small pyramid, where there were granite casing stones that were still in place, and you could see this inscription on one of the faces. But it was, it seemed obvious at that point on this tour that was just put there by some
I think
later
that's
people.
supposed to be 19th dynasty, New Kingdom. It was like Ramses II's son that inscribed that. So it's not the original.
Yeah. So one of the things we learned, this is a major focus of the trip. One of the major focuses of Yusuf, as he teaches on these tours, he goes from site to site and he shows you over and over and over again how definitive evidence that carvings of hieroglyphs into stones on the walls of whatever structure does not tell you who built that structure.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you see the reuse of these giant megaliths, in many cases just being reused for another structure, and in some cases the hieroglyphs are sideways or upside down or behind on the back side of a wall, where they should have, if they were supposed to be contemporary with the structure, would have been on the front.
Right.
So it's just a reused piece of an obelisk or something. And even the obelisks, there's definitely a possibility that the hieroglyphs that are scratched into these or carved into these obelisks were just done by later people. The obelisks were already there.
So what you're saying is you think a lot of this stuff was completely clear of any kind of writing whatsoever until later times.
Yes, and when you and some of the oldest known structures, like the Osirian, are just completely devoid of any hieroglyphics.
Yeah, and the Great Pyramid has no hieroglyphics in it either. I mean, there's not carved ones, right?
Yes, but again, they say that the casing stones, were
carved,
covered in hieroglyphs. Well, they might have been, but that doesn't mean that the people who carved the hieroglyphs in there built.
That's right.
Put the casing stones in place.
And one of the ways that Yusuf would point this out, and just, he'd make it extremely obvious, is we would go to, say, a Ptolemaic era temple, and amidst all of the Egyptian hieroglyphs and reliefs and carvings, somewhere on there, you'd see a cleared square, and somebody had written Leonardo 1820.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
carved into the stone. And he's like, so clearly, you cannot date structures by inscriptions.
Yeah, and some of the and a lot of these temples are made with this sandstone like material, and they would literally just face the whole wall off again. And so there could have been a whole sets of hieroglyphics that were put on there by perhaps the original builders, and then that wall was just faced off by a later king or whoever, and then they fill it up with new carvings and new hieroglyphs.
So what you're saying is this place has so much history, it's hard to determine which parts of what belong to what history.
Oh my God! Yes, it was like day after day. We saw examples of this over and over again, and in some cases, very clear examples of something that was in the process of being erased or ground down to get rid of the hieroglyphs, where there'd be this real faint edge of a hieroglyph from a previous carver
inscription
a previous inscription on granite, and it was very finely done. And then the new hieroglyphs were like cut in really deep, but they're a little bit rougher in appearance. They're not quite as good.
Yep.
But it's like, the guy who got rid of the original hieroglyphs was like, well, I'm going to make my hieroglyphs really deep so that somebody can't do what I just did.
Right. And erase them.
So it was, like I said, day after day, we saw this in so many examples that it became very clear that it was very confusing.
Yeah.
So tell me about the little satellite pyramids. What are those?
Man, they look like, I always thought they were mastabas for some reason, but no, those are the if you're looking at a map of the Great Pyramid complex with the three Great Pyramids, the Great Pyramid has these three small pyramids next to it in a line, and they are on the southern side.
And how big are they?
I mean, they're huge.
Yeah.
They're
just not as big.
They are enormous. And that was the thing. It's like I'm walking up to these things and I'm just like, oh my God, these things are freaking enormous. And they're also, the masonry looks the same, like the work of the core blocks. Because again, all the casing stones on these, most of the casing stones have been quarried off of them because they were Tura limestone, which is a very high quality, very hard, and durable limestone.
Right.
Beautiful white limestone that was highly prized by a lot of builders, so they were removed and used in other structures. But yeah, they're giant. I can't really give you a good idea. I don't know. I'm trying to think of it in paces, like how you could pace around these things. They're just giant.
Yeah, they're huge.
I don't know what they were. I don't think they were tombs. And there's no evidence that they were ever tombs. But those three satellite pyramids have an interesting feature, which is they are lined up. The first one that you come to is lined up exactly with the wall of the Great Pyramid. So it's like if you walk up next to it and you look down the wall towards the Great Pyramid and you line your eye up with where that wall is just like a flat, you can see across to the other pyramids corner and wall, and it lines up perfectly, right? So they're in line with each other.
Yeah,
and then
their corners are put at the same line, basically.
Yeah. And so then the other two fall behind it. Well, I had read or seen somewhere, maybe I saw this in Pyramid Code, that those pyramids' shadows, obviously the one that's perfectly in line with the pyramid, with the Great Pyramid, its shadow will cast right on that wall of the Great Pyramid and line up perfectly with its corner on the equinox. Or on the, let's see,
should be the equinox if it's south of it, right?
No, wait, am I thinking here?
I got to figure this out.
The middle one, I think it's the middle one is on the equinox, and then the other two, the two outside ones are the two different solstices. Their shadows line up.
That's what it is.
With the corner of the Great Pyramid. Yeah, I'm trying to get this right in my head. So yeah, it's.
But is that what they're for?
I don't know.
This is part of this.
It's just a feature.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's an interesting feature that they are positioned in this way. Because
do they have entrances to them, or are they solid?
I don't know.
I didn't see any entrances, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's something.
There's got to be something in there. Because I don't think that I think that's just part of the design of these things. Like I'm pretty sure that everyone that's ever been found has some sort of chamber or descending passage.
Yeah. And the other thing about most of these pyramids, we went to the Bent Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, a couple of Mastabas. We went to the Maidum Pyramid, and then of course the Great Pyramid and the Middle Pyramid, or Khafre. On all of them except for the Great Pyramid and then I guess the Bent, you spent most of your time when you were quote unquote inside the pyramid actually below it.
Okay.
All the tunnels
underneath it.
Yeah, you're underneath it. You go into this descending passage, and the first few yards or meters or whatever of the descending passage is inside the core masonry of the pyramid, but it's going down.
Right.
And eventually you pass through into the bedrock. And then after that, you're just exploring tunnels that are cut out of the bedrock, and you're not actually up in the body of the pyramid at all. So, but there are exceptions. Obviously, the Great Pyramid does have structures inside the body of the pyramid.
Right.
Lots of them. And the Bent Pyramid also has structures inside the body of it. But all of them have structures below them.
Yeah. There's one pyramid, it's Kent Kawa's pyramid, and it's on the Giza Plateau. And it's interesting because it's kind of like the Sphinx, where the Sphinx is a yardang, which is like a protrusion of the bedrock or some piece of the bedrock that's still sticking up
right
above the bedrock everywhere else, right? This pyramid was like that. It had the bedrock was still very high up, and they had cut the bedrock down. They'd carved the bedrock down into a square, this protrusion that was sticking up, and its sides were sloped, and then they sort of made like indentations in the wall, these straight up and down indentations along the wall, almost like a corrugation along the wall, and then they fit blocks to the outside of it and built a pyramid over it.
Wow.
So it's like they cut around the bedrock, made it square, and then built a pyramid on top. And so the bottom part that was exposed bedrock is only exposed now because a lot of the masonry has been quarried away until they just hit bedrock, because there's only a few courses of block around the bedrock. The rest of the pyramid core blocks are sitting on top of this giant protrusion of bedrock. So it's like none of these things are built quite the same.
Yeah.
But they do exhibit similar patterns that, they utilized that piece of bedrock for a large portion of this pyramid, because it's a small one. It's like a satellite pyramid.
Whereas with Khafre, they actually put it in an area where to flatten the base, to make the foundation flat, they had to remove a whole huge area of the plateau. So the basically the back end of that pyramid is actually
there's 20 or 30 foot walls.
It's inside of its own enclosure, which they had to cut out of the bedrock to make it. So you're just like, you're like, okay, over here they put the pyramid, incorporated bedrock extension into the pyramid, and over here they cut the bedrock away.
Right.
But actually there's still some courses at the bottom of that pyramid that are just part of the original bedrock that they didn't cut away. So they left some of the bedrock there to kind of lock the pyramid in. It's really interesting how they decided to do this. You see the mind of the builders everywhere you go.
And the Great Pyramid is on uneven ground.
Yeah.
So whereas the Khafre pyramid, the Middle Pyramid, they leveled the ground before they did it. With the Great Pyramid, they didn't level the ground. So some walls, when the original casing stones were there, those casing stones went down further and thus stuck out further than the rest of the pyramid. So it's like you could imagine that if you cleared away all of the flooring because they modified the bedrock around it by tiling it with giant, we're not talking about freaking 1/4-inch thick tiles. These are multiple feet thick tiles.
Huh.
Right? That they put on the bedrock and fitted them exactly to the bedrock.
And sometimes
underneath.
they're like 10 paces across.
Yeah, and extremely thick. Gigantic stones. They tiled this thing so that when the pyramid was finished, it looked like it was sitting on level ground. But if you dug away all those tiles around it, you would find out that some walls actually went further down and thus stuck farther out.
Yeah.
than the other
Okay.
walls.
Yeah,
So it's
all right.
not even square. But when you consider where the level of the tiling everywhere, it was square.
Damn.
So it's like they made decisions, these strange decisions in different ones, but I don't know, it was fascinating. Yeah, Russ is right. Like you could see the mind of the builders, I think, and there were a couple of revelations I think that we had when we were there about, just looking at these things from a construction standpoint.
Yeah.
That cleared up so many things for me.
Or made better questions come to light, Sometimes,
Well, yeah,
sometimes it doesn't clear. Like it's clearly this is very confusing.
Well,
like you
I mean,
said earlier.
by that I mean it's not clear exactly what happened, but it's clear that my former way of looking at it was incorrect or
Yes.
flawed.
Right.
So explain that. Like, how did you look at it before versus now?
So one of the examples is, how there's a lot of talk and a lot of pictures and examples of these blocks, these megalithic blocks that go around corners. They go around inside, like instead of laying a block and then putting butting another one up against it to make an inside corner, the block actually turns the corner for like 4 inches.
Right.
You familiar with that kind of stuff? It's like we look at this and marvel at it, like, wow, why? They in other words, they get this block here and they're like, well, okay, let's go ahead and cut at this inside corner and all that kind of fix the block just so, and set it up there. And that I think is no longer the case. Is that I don't think that that's how they did it, because it seems clear that they often worked with what we're calling pillowy blocks. Like they did not face these stones down flat before they put them into the structure.
Yeah, the facing comes at the very end.
Yeah, it's the last thing they did. So they build these structures, and you see this kind of stuff. Like imagine the structures like at Sacsayhuaman, the walls there that are real pillowy blocks.
Yeah.
They built stuff just like that in Egypt. And you can see it in multiple places. You see it in the Osirian. You see it on the Menkaure casing stones. The blocks are just really lumpy. They look like they're stacking up marshmallows. And then there are obvious places where they came back later and flattened those walls, like planed them flat.
Right.
Somehow. And they would remove 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 inches of the thickness of that block when they planed these walls off. In some cases less, but there was places where they were removing up to 10 inches of block to flatten it. And this is what gives you the feature of these blocks seeming to go around the inside corners.
Okay.
Because they build this, and this is a hypothesis. This is what I'm thinking now. They build the walls out of these pillowy blocks. And if you're building a room, then you stack all the blocks up in this square shape for your room. Then you go back in there and you plane all those walls of that room perfectly flat and make the room square after you've already set the blocks. So you get close when you're stacking the blocks, but you don't have to worry that every single one of them is perfectly lined up square.
Gotcha.
Because you're going to come back in and plane it down and make right angles inside that room. And when you do that, when you get to a corner, you're planing off 4 or 5 inches of the block on that wall. Well, the blocks at that corner are going to go around the corner 4 or 5 inches.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And in some cases, it looked like, because at the corners, like especially you could see this clearly in the Valley Temple, which is next to the Sphinx Temple down by the Sphinx. And the inside of the Valley Temple, the exterior of it, the core masonry or whatever, is humongous, massive limestone blocks. But on the inside of the Valley Temple, it's cased in granite from the Aswan quarry. And when you walked up to the corners, and whoever did this job, the inside, the granite work, they did finish off the blocks. They made them flat. So if they built them pillowy, which they probably did, they were able to complete the job of planing them off flat. So everywhere you're going in there aren't really any pillowy looking Sacsayhuaman style or Peruvian looking stonework, because they're all flattened out. But the corners, and I'm sure you've seen this, plenty of people have seen this in videos. People point out how the blocks seem to go around corners in this particular structure. But when you actually walk up to the corner, you see this clear mark going all the way down the corner, and it has a radius, right? So from the top of the wall all the way to the floor, you see a clear what looks like a tool mark of some kind. Like imagine if you just drilled a hole, so one of the scenarios we were talking about is like you build this room, a square room out of these pillowy blocks, and then you get up on top of the walls and you mark out where you want your corners to be on the inside of the room, which is maybe 4, 6, 10 inches back from where the blocks are actually sticking out right now. So you make those 4 marks and you make that perfectly square, you draw some lines around, and then you drill holes all the way to the floor in those 4 spots. And then you come in with your planing machine, whatever it is, your tools, however you did it, and you flatten out those walls until you hit those drill holes at the corners on all 4 walls. And then you end up with a structure that looks like it does. It has a radius at the corner, which is a continuous line all the way through all the blocks, and the blocks all seem to go around the corners on the insides. So hopefully that's I know that's tough to follow when you're
I
talking
follow
about
what you're
it.
saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
interesting.
it's just it's one of those things where once you're there and you start to see all the details and you're standing inside the room, you're like, oh, maybe this is how they did this, But it takes a while because you walk into the Valley Temple and that's not immediately clear because you don't see any pillowy blocks because
you have to see these other sites with pillowy. That's the thing about it, is that after you've been there for days and you're being led around by Ben, who has a lot of experience there, and Yusuf, who has a whole lifetime of experience there, and they're always pointing these interesting things out. Yusuf also is a stonemason.
Yep.
He's telling you the types of stone that you're dealing with, the hardness on the mold scale of each stone.
And then just the overall difficulty of working it, period. Because
what types of tools that could be used to do certain features, so that you're getting all this information at the same time about the stonework and then it's like these things start to build up, and then you see different examples at different states of completion.
Yeah.
And then it starts to, then you go back to the site that you were at before, which was really good about our trip. We got to go to Giza first, and then we got to come back to it at the end of the trip after going all around Egypt and seeing all this different stuff. And then we come back and see the pyramids again and see the Valley Temple again and look at all of this stuff and like, okay.
Yeah.
Like
now it's in context.
You got some context.
Yeah.
And there's, it was just a fantastic, fantastic trip. So.
I always wondered about the idea that sometimes that they had a way of actually softening these blocks so they'd kind of melt into place to some degree.
I did too. I was definitely on that train. I don't think that that's what they were doing, but of course I don't know for sure.
Right. Well, no one does.
It's just that
someone does.
Upon
someone up there.
Upon close inspection of these stones, you can see the pattern in the granite, for example, of crystal inclusions. These are not deformed on the worked surfaces in any way. You see what I'm saying? So to me, I imagine like if you're melting the stone, you're melting all of it, and away goes those crystal formations, and you're going to have some kind of a patina on the exterior that is different than the interior. Now, there was a strange case of a set of blocks in one location that did seem to have some very odd patina about an inch or two thick on the outside, and the inside was just like
looked different,
totally different. So this is definitely an anomaly. But in most of the cases, I would say that the grains in these stones did not exhibit any different look than because in a lot of cases you have to imagine we're seeing broken blocks.
Right.
So we're not only looking at the finished surface. You've seen a bunch of finished surface, and then here's the wall broken in half, and now you're looking at the inside, and it's the same. So I find that hard to believe that that's what they were doing. I think I'm really going on this sonic drilling idea, sonic planing.
Yeah.
Like that they could use ultrasound vibration and a slurry of some hard aggregate material, and a possibly even fairly soft metal work tip on the tool like copper, because with the sonic technology, the copper's not what's doing the work. It's just the transducer to provide the vibration.
So early on in this show, I had someone on, and I don't remember who it was, but they said that they had looked at, I think it was the drill marks in the Great Pyramid, and tried to match it up with modern day drills. And they said the only thing it matched up with was the sonic drill.
I
Yeah.
I totally believe that. Yeah.
We saw many examples of what were called, drill core holes, right? So what's really interesting about a lot of the drill holes that you see in Egypt is that they weren't like a drill you think of now, where the drill is like a solid piece with a spiral on it, and you drill out and when you're using it, it drills out all the material to make the hole.
Mm-hmm.
What they were using was coring machines. So
Like drill tubes.
it's a tube.
Okay.
So the actual tool itself is a hollow tube, and it cuts down into the stone, and then when you pull it out, you've got a very
cylinder.
deep circular hole in the stone with a cylinder of stone in the middle, and you can just break that out with something. You can use a chisel or whatever, but you just break the core out, and then you can pull the core out of there, and now you have a hole in the stone. But like all over the place, we saw this because in many cases, like Kyle said, the blocks would be broken, so you could actually look at the entire inside of this hole that was drilled out, and in many cases, you could see the bottom part of the drill hole, and that the tool itself was very thin. Whatever it was thin material, and these would be 3-4 inches in diameter. And then the actual cut that was being made is like 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch at most. Less than that most of the time, more around 1/8 of an inch, a little tiny thin hole, thin circular cut into the stone.
And there's giant striations inside, like a huge spiral inside these things, right? And the lines of the spiral in some cases are like almost 1/16 of an inch apart.
Yeah.
And so this has been one of the puzzling things about, people trying to look at this in terms of drilling, that they're like, man, the rate at which it's cutting down into this is so great that we don't know of any material hard enough to do it. But if you're doing sonic drilling, the turning of the bit, the purpose of that is just to remove material and also to make sure that the hole is actually circular, because your bit can warp. If you're not rotating the bit and your tube is not perfectly circular, then you will end up with a wonky hole. But if you slowly rotate that tube, you are going to get a round hole.
Yeah.
Right.
And rotating it also helps pull the material out so that it's not in the way.
Okay.
Right. So you can spin it slowly. Right. So what's
So
doing
that your feed rate is
So the feed rate, the amount that the amount per revolution that the tool is biting into the stone is greatly increased, because you're just spinning the thing slowly, because it isn't the turning that's actually doing the cutting. It's the ultrasonic part.
the vibration.
The vibration is doing the cutting. The turning is just to remove material and to make sure your hole is actually circular. And so you can get these spiral cut, these spiral witness marks, tool marks on the insides of the drill hole that have what looks like an incredibly deep bite, but it's just because it's just spinning slowly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Now,
of course, the question becomes, where did all that technology go? How did it get lost?
Right. Yeah. Where is it?
So, okay, let's talk about that. The big question is, like, okay, if they had all these machines, and in some cases, when you're looking at the Serpent, which is a fairly small cave compared to the gigantic granite boxes that are down in it, they couldn't have lowered them in from the roof. They had to bring them in because it's a cave cut into the bedrock. So there's no possibility of this thing being built up from above. So when you're looking at that, you're thinking, like, they had to have some pretty awesome machines to be able to finish these boxes out down in this tiny, small space.
Right.
And so when you're looking at materials that could handle the type of, rigidity that these machines need to have to cut and to do this work so finely, you're talking about metal, steel, very strong materials that we have today that
alloys
can do this type of stuff. Well, where is all that stuff? So if it did exist, where did it go? And I just have to say, where are all the casing blocks on the pyramid?
Yeah.
On the Great Pyramid? They're gone. Like, you've got like a few pieces. Why are they gone? Because it was a valuable material for thousands of years. So if we're talking about a precursor civilization that built these pyramids and cut these stones with some machinery, that machinery was laying around for 10 to 12 to 14, who knows how many thousands of years. So just completely disregard the fact that these metals might oxidize and rust away, but that for that amount of time, people would be holding these materials quite valuable, and they would be tearing these materials down.
Yeah, they'd be scavenging it. Yeah.
Scavenging it, smaller and smaller pieces being traded, sold, turned into knives, done whatever, get lost, rust away. And I mean, this, I don't have any problem imagining that the metals that may have been used, electrum, right? Like that's one of these mythical metals that supposedly they had, are just completely gone because they were broken down into tiny bits and traded and then oxidized ultimately.
Well, when you consider that the only reason we have the Antikythera mechanism is that it was at the bottom of the Mediterranean.
Reserved.
Yes.
And it clearly was not the first of its kind, but we've never found anything else like it.
Yeah, that's right. Great point.
And we're not talking 10,000 years ago here.
Yeah, 2,000.
Right.
And look,
yeah,
what's behind Gantenbrink's door? I think that they faked that whole thing of looking behind the door in the Queen's Chamber shaft.
Yep.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And we have it on pretty good authority that that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we go into that, because I want to hear more about that, this mythical metal. What's the mythical metal thing?
I'm just trying to say that that the Department of Antiquities may well know about some of these ancient machine artifacts that they just don't want to reveal. This is why there's so much secrecy around certain aspects in the area.
Yeah.
So
or they say, we've never dug down there. No, we've never done ground penetrating radar on the causeway, or we don't know how far that shaft goes down, or we don't know where those tunnels go. It's like, really? You don't know any of that? Are you sure? I don't believe that story. And it's possible that even still, there may be totally undiscovered underground chambers with some of those machines preserved. If they were put in a situation where they were not going to be underwater and they were protected somehow, like, I don't know, wrapped in greasy plastic or something, they might still be there. Or there may be rusting hulks, but they may still be around if they haven't been available to be scavenged. But okay, going back to your question about the mythical metal, electrum.
Well, this I'm looking this up right now. It's saying it's a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver with trace amounts of copper and other metals.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
that is the
naturally
standard,
occurring.
That's the standard model. Yeah,
okay.
It can't be an alloy because they weren't doing metallurgy back then.
Right.
But yes, electrum itself is a mythical metal. No one's ever found a naturally occurring version of it. It's not really clear what they meant when they said electrum. The other kind is, I think it's called orichalcum. I don't know how to say it. Some people think it's the standard model, I guess, is it's an amalgam of copper and gold. But yeah, plenty of the remaining obelisk fragments. Not all obelisks had this, but we saw plenty of fragments where you could kind of walk up and see a piece of it laying on the ground with the top part still intact.
Mm-hmm.
And right at the top of the obelisk, of the stone obelisk, there would be a notch cut in. Like, in other words, it wouldn't go all the way to a pyramid point. That it would be going towards a pyramid point, and then that would be cut flat, like a mastaba or a truncated pyramid, and then there would be this notch cut into the top. And Yusuf told us that the stories say, that the writings imply that they tipped those obelisks with a finishing off, like a bin, a small pyramid of electrum that would slide into that notch and lock into the top of the, and that it had mythical powers, the metal itself.
I mean, I just, I'm looking at the almighty Wikipedia, who's never wrong about anything, and they're saying that it is a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver with trace amounts of copper, and they have a picture here of natural electrum.
Yeah,
but
they just don't know if that's the same stuff they were talking about.
Okay,
right.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to the door, which part are you saying that the rumors are saying that got faked? Like going up that to find the end of it in the first place, or
no, the second one that happened 10 years after Gantenbrink's original discovery, the one where they kicked him out of the country and then waited 10 years and then sold the rights.
He finds the door, and then they write it. They do this. Okay, they're like, okay, hold off. Let's take a break. Do a big write-up. He writes this big write-up for publication, a press release, and then they keep sending it back and saying, no, change this, change. They do this thing with on and on and on and on, and eventually they just like they never publish it. And then they ban him from coming back. Like they kick him off the job. They replace him. And it's just like, okay.
And then 10 years goes by, and then they sold, and this is Zahi Hawass was involved in this. They sold the rights to like Discovery Channel to do a new exploration of the shafts where they were going to drill a hole through one of the doors and see what's on the other side.
Right.
And they drill the hole through the door and they look, and what's on the other side? It's a tiny little cubicle room with another really rough looking door on the other side.
And a couple of vague inscriptions.
Yeah, very anticlimactic. So yes, it's that story has been suspicious to us for a long time, but when we were in Egypt, we definitely got more interesting information that second part was staged. That the actual thing that was shown to the public was not the actual exploration that they did. That part was staged. Like, in other words, the implication is that they did do a second exploration of those shafts. It's not necessarily clear that it happened right after Gantenbrink left or 10 years later, but whatever they showed to the public on that Discovery Channel thing was not the actual exploration of those shafts.
Another clue is that they're like, let's do it live.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, they don't ever do anything live like that.
But if
like
they were
some major, it's just.
If they were going to fake it, though, wouldn't you think they would have presented something that fit their story better?
Well, they had to make it something that no one would want to actually get into. If you made it a big chamber with all kinds of interesting stuff, then people will be like, well, we got to get in there and look at that.
Gotcha.
You don't do that, because then that makes it where you're like, well, we're not ever going to go in there and look at that stuff.
Yeah, you need nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah, you need nothing to see here. Yeah.
But doesn't it also fit with whatchamacallit's idea of the Giza Power Plant?
Chris Dunn.
Yeah, Chris Dunn.
Well, okay. So what Chris Dunn has attempted to do is to take all of the data, to the best data that he could collect, and try to come up with just one of any number of possible scenarios that this thing could have been engineered as a device to do something, right? So the goal was not to perhaps speculate on other aspects that are undiscovered, but to try to take every discovery and fit it into an idea.
Okay.
Like create an idea based on every discovery. So, he would have considered whatever that was and tried to fit it into, tried to create a use for it or a purpose for it.
I see. Okay.
So if they had discovered a giant room in there, he would have tried to fit in a giant room.
Yeah.
Because that's what he was doing, is taking the data that was on the best authority, and of course going through the historical data of previous discoveries by other people that are now no longer, things that have been destroyed, but say, okay, well, that was found, so we have to incorporate that. Like you see what I'm saying? He was trying to.
I think he did a good job, but I don't think he's specifically saying that this is definitely what it is. He's just like, look, here's
a way to look at it.
Here's a way to look at it. Here's a possible explanation of this thing as a gigantic, where it makes it worth it to a civilization to engage in an enormous project like this.
And that changed the way I look at this stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not convinced on the power plant idea, but I'm not opposed to it at all. I think it's just, crawling around inside that thing and looking all the mysterious stuff. I want to take the same route with my thinking in trying to discern. There's a lot of questions about the history of what's happened, and people blasting through walls with dynamite and all.
Yeah.
You've got to reverse engineer all that and kind of put it back to its original state to really,
if you can,
to try to come up with an idea, right? Something that works.
Yeah, because once you like reverse engineer all of the stuff that's been written about, then you have who knows how many thousands of years of stuff that hasn't been written about, where they've been in there mucking around. But yeah, the another thing that kind of goes along with that point that was just made completely clear when you're there is that number one, I'll say the Dynastics were absolute masters of stone. They made fantastically beautiful, amazing temples and structures, right? Mm-hmm. With enormous columns and absolutely beautiful carvings. And there's no doubt that they were the ones making them. We're not talking about like everything in Egypt that's really big and cool.
And they also utilized the planing off thing. They built these columns out of giant,
discs.
what I was calling like biscuit shaped freaking rocks, right? They're just big biscuits. And they stack the biscuits up, but it's sandstone. So it's much easier with the tools we know the Dynastics had for them to come back and plane that pillar down into a fine circular pillar.
Yeah.
Okay.
We saw examples of where there's a whole row of pillars, and the last 2 or 3, the biscuits haven't been planed off, so they're rough.
Yeah,
You could see it's like in progress, right? So we saw that. But again, they were masters of stone. But Egypt is full of structures with, these temples where they're huge open spaces, gigantic, massive entryways, huge doorways that tower above you, and you go in and you're in a forest of columns covered in high or low relief, beautiful carvings of people and images and hieroglyphs and paintings, and the ceilings are covered in stars, and it's all painted, and you can tell when you're in there, it's like people are meant to walk through this space.
Yeah.
It was made to experience like this. You're supposed to walk in and just be in awe, and it works. Well, when you're in the pyramids, and this is pretty much every pyramid we went into, it's not like that. You're cramped, crawling, like, hunch walking, like you have to hunch over, and you're walking down these incredibly steep angles.
And it's very difficult to observe
Yeah.
where you are, the space that you're in, because of the position you're in, and the angle of the room is so, that's just...
In other words, the pyramids are not like temples in that people are supposed to be in them.
And I would say this is the same for the actual tombs, right? In the Valley of the Kings, when we went down into some actual tombs.
Yeah.
Same deal. The hallways were sloped, but they were giant, and so you can walk and you can look at the walls that were ornately carved, beautiful carvings on these walls, and you're just in awe. The rooms were large, but this is obviously made for. There's a funeral procession, not precession. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a procession.
It's a procession.
It's not going backwards.
Yeah, he's not coming back to life yet. But yeah, that was obviously made to be observed at least
One time.
One time.
Yeah.
But in the pyramids, no, there's none of that. It's
like walking
silent.
around in a system. Like, one of the examples I tried to give on one of our podcasts about this was, it reminded me of, like exploring a drainage system under a city. You're crawling through tunnels, and then you come out into a weird chamber that's got an archway, and then it's got a trough down the middle that water's supposed to run down, and then it's got other weird tunnels going off that you have to crawl through. It's not
strange alcove on the right because there's supposed to be some valve or whatever.
Yeah, there's a machinery over there. It's not like walking into a cathedral, which is what the temples were like.
Right.
The cathedral is meant as a space for people and for them to go in and to feel, wow, this is huge, it's beautiful, it's ornate, it's covered in artwork. Whereas when you're down in those drainage systems, there's no artwork.
Right.
There's just weird valves and strange alcoves and tight tunnels and stuff that's difficult to walk through. It's like it's a system. Maybe not. You wouldn't necessarily call a drainage system for a city a machine, but it's a system that's not necessarily meant for people to walk around in. It's for something else. It's got a functional purpose, right? And that's what it was like being in those pyramids. Now, there were chambers in there that were absolutely awe-inspiring, like the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, the Grand Gallery. They're awe-inspiring, but they're not. Again, they're not. It's awe-inspiring, like you're standing inside of a giant water cistern.
Like when if you walked inside a ancient nuclear power plant, and there's like some huge, ridiculous room in there for some reactor,
strange power purpose. Yeah, it's like it's really like you're walking around inside of a huge device, as opposed to the temples, which were definitely made for people.
Now, what about the audio qualities of the Great Pyramid, and like the fact that people say that it seems to be a consciousness-altering machine?
I'm not opposed to that idea. However, I don't feel I didn't get any feelings like that, other than just the absolute. Like for me, when I entered the King's Chamber, I had I guess you could call it a spiritual experience, but it's very specific because I'm marveling at the builders. These people are lost. I'm having this same type of feeling that I have on a small scale when I find an arrowhead in the woods. There's suddenly like this connection that I have with this very ancient, mysterious people that made this beautiful artifact, right?
Yeah.
But beyond that, I couldn't say. However, I will say that the resonant qualities in these structures, in many places in these structures, is
it's intense.
It's intense and quite amazing. Like, for example, we went into the Khafre pyramid, the middle pyramid. The first day or the second day we were there, and got in there, and in the main chamber inside that one, there's a granite box, right? Well, this granite box has a lid, and the lid is slid back, and Yusuf laid down in that box. Like, first he's standing outside the box, and he hums and finds the note of the room, the resonant frequency of the room, and it's just like, and then once he hits that frequency, you no longer hear his voice.
Yeah,
the room is now singing.
The room takes over. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, then and you're just like, whoa, that's cool, dude. That is really cool. And then he gets down in the box, lays down. Now he's out of sight, and then suddenly this incredibly much more intense, just like, bam! It's just hitting you from all sides, and it was just like, holy crap, that box is tuned to this room, and it is like a projector for that. He hums that same note in the box, and it just projects that frequency to a perfect position, and it just nails you in the room. It's awesome. And so, yeah, that's a very interesting aspect of a lot of these places, and yet I am not convinced that audible frequencies of vibration were part of the intention of the design. Just and going from the power plant idea, these are just destructive frequencies at high amplitude, very destructive, and yet they're not going to help you with a whole lot of power, like the power in the way that we think of it today. Like, this is not it's like
generate a lot of energy, but
like high frequency stuff is much better because it's not nearly as destructive to the materials you're dealing with, like this stone.
I guess I was more thinking of how it might alter your consciousness when you're in there.
Well, I can tell you that when you so we went under is it Mastaba 17. We climbed under Mastaba 17, which is an old, it's like, it's mud brick, I think. It's falling apart, but it's got a tunnel beneath it, and you really have to crawl. Like, it's a literal on your hands and knees crawling through dirt. There's bits of stone and bone and stuff in the dirt, and once you get through, you get into this chamber, and once again, now you're beneath like a strange melting mud brick structure, but you get down in there, and there's this megalithic, beautiful chamber down there with perfectly flat walls, and in it is this box, another big stone box. And it has the lid partially pushed off, like it's kind of slid, tilted. So you can get in there. And I got in that box and laid down in it, where you're almost, the lid isn't slid off very much. It's a tight fit. So when you get down in there, you're almost completely sealed up in this box. And I hummed in there and found the right note. And the box itself responds so strongly that it is instantly consciousness altering.
Yeah.
You have this instant, like, strange, I don't know, it's I can definitely, like, I'll say this, I wasn't in there for very long. I did it 2 or 3 times maybe, and every time I did it, it was so intense that when I stopped, it was startling, right? That the sound is so intense, it kind of takes over your brain. It's like your brain doesn't know what to do with it, and all thought stops, and you're just humming, and there's this overwhelmingly amazing sound reverberating all around you, and you're surrounded by it. So I can imagine, I wasn't able to do this because everybody had to have a turn at it, but I can imagine that it would be easy to put yourself into like a sort of meditative state, an altered state or a meditative state, because it instantly empties your mind of everything except this sound.
Yeah,
because it's so powerful.
But look, years ago, Russ and I went, in the evening, maybe a little bit late at night, to a town nearby here.
Oh yeah,
we went up on this mountaintop, this hilltop, and there's like these water tanks up there, giant, city water storage tanks.
Big concrete things.
Yeah, they're made of concrete, round. And one of them was abandoned, is like empty, but it had a ladder on the side of it, and we were able to jump up to the ladder and climb up on top of this thing. And then there's a porthole in the top, a hatch, and we were able to go down in it.
Mm.
And then we spent like the next 4 hours in that thing humming and singing stuff, just because it was so freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And it does. It's so awesome to feel it, to have a chamber where this resonant. I think this is one of the reasons why they build cathedrals in this way, to do certain things with sound. So I do think that that's part of the design of these cathedrals, because it does help create like an awe or an altered state.
Yeah.
And yet you can do this in a water tank.
Sure.
That doesn't mean the
water tank was definitely not made to expand our consciousness, but it could. Right, it can help because it's got these resonant qualities,
and
it's empty.
That's where I'm at really with these spaces that we went into, because so many of them, just the tunnel going from one room to another sometimes would be so intense. People be talking in there, and you could hear the guy with the low voice is like, yeah, and then he'd hit a certain tone, and just whoom, the whole tunnel does that, and you're like, oh my god. I'm not convinced that this is. And I'm not throwing it out. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not convinced that this is by design.
Gotcha,
in other words, the geometry is by design, and for what reason I'm not sure. I think that these resonant frequencies are just an effect of whatever the original intent was.
Yeah. Another example I've used is you've seen cargo containers that are on cargo ships, or they get put on the back of an 18-wheeler truck, right? Those big metal boxes.
Yeah.
If you go inside one of those and shut the door and it's totally empty, you can get it'll resonate. It's going to have resonant qualities, and it can be very intense and powerful. But those cargo boxes are not made to be resonant chambers. They're just built to a standard out of very hard material with flat walls, so they will resonate. Which is actually why they make most of them with corrugated walls, so they don't do that, because you don't want destructive frequencies building up in those boxes.
I was fully waiting for your water tower story to end with, and we never got out of there.
Yeah, we're still in there, Seriah.
This is all a dream.
That's right. Who was phone?
So we're starting to run low on time here, but we can continue this in a Patreon segment. When they were talking about the stuff that was fake, did they give you any hint of what they felt was really found in there?
No, I don't.
No, but I think the idea, because this is just generally part of the topic of conversation everywhere we went, and that is the evidence for a lost period of history with more advanced technology than that which we find with the dynastic Egyptians.
Yeah, right. That's the implication.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the implication, that when they discover something that doesn't fit the narrative, right, then they're not going to want to release that information.
Sure.
Now, I have trouble with this, because I think surely they must know that this would create all kinds of more tourism.
You would think,
and
yeah.
So I think it maybe comes down to things that are more political, which I don't really want to get into, but that there are other incentives, right, to keep this type of stuff that's beyond the economy.
Yes. Yeah.
And there, like one example that we can give that's not too political, and this is not necessarily about an ancient civilization either, are some of the rules they have where you're thinking, like they don't allow drones in the country at all.
Really?
And you want to, you want to come there and you want, like, I want to bring my drone and I want to get some aerial shots of this or that, and you're just totally not allowed. You'll get busted at customs in the airport with a drone. They'll take it away from you. And you'll also spend some time in a back room talking to some police officers and stuff if you do it. One guy tried to bring a drone in and he got busted. You're not supposed to bring drones, and you're wondering, like, well, what are they trying to hide? It has nothing to do. Well, we were told it has nothing to do with the antiquities. This is the military. A lot of those antiquities sites are next to or nearby or adjacent to large military installations, and we saw
which is also interesting.
Yeah, why are the military out there in the middle of the desert,
on gigantic archaeological
where
sites.
The pyramids are? Yeah, exactly. So they don't want you flying drones, they say, because you could be a spy looking at their military stuff.
Fair enough.
So there's other incentives for stuff like that at first seems like you're like, what are they hiding? Well, it's the military, and they say the military just doesn't want you looking at what kind of gun emplacements they've got or something, whatever it is. So, but there's definitely evidence, and we had conversations about these kinds of things many times about how certain things had been found. It was never made explicit, but they would say, yeah, stuff has been found there. It didn't make people happy. So that dig was shut down, or that guy was sent away, or that thing that was found was, put away and is not displayed to the public and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, there are pictures of a chamber inside the Sphinx.
Yeah. I mean, the Sphinx stuff is definitely at the top of the controversies in this kind of thing. And then you were like, well, why? Again, like Kyle mentioned earlier on, all over Giza, there's deep shafts that are filled with rubble you're told no one's ever dug them out completely. And you're just like, how is this possible? On one of the most famous, biggest archaeological sites in the world, that no one has ever dug this all the way out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hard to believe.
So either you have to believe that they just don't allow it for some reason, or they have and they don't talk about it for some reason.
Or they may already know what's there.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
And that, so yeah, there's conspiracy theories all over. I would just go back briefly to the previous topic, the pyramids, sound resonance and stuff. I am all about looking into the resonant qualities of all this stuff. And there was a guy on the tour with us who was doing much better work at recording all that data and taking that data than I was. So I kind of just stopped doing it. I just did it out of just pure enjoyment of, finding a resonant tone in a room. And I stopped recording the frequencies
until we got to the Serapim.
And then, the Serapim, I actually started recording all of it in the boxes because and that for me was just like, I want to know if the interior spaces of these boxes are all the same.
Yeah.
And so the resonant frequency would tell you that. So it's a very useful form of measurement. That's very quick and you can do it without getting busted
getting busted for carrying around lasers and stuff like that. Yeah. Because one of the things we were told explicitly by the tour people there, they're like, look, you're tourists. Remember that. We're not supposed to be doing science. We're not allowed to do science. So the deal is that we're going to do science because that's what we're here for. But they had basically like what amounts to a safe word. So if somebody from the tour shouted out that, and it was Ramesses II, right? So they'd shout out Ramesses II, and then we all would stop doing science stuff and start taking photographs and looking like tourists. It was great. And Yusuf told us the reason he uses Ramesses II, he's like, that guy carved his name into everything all across Egypt, so you can say it anywhere and it works. No one will question why you're calling out Ramesses II's name, because his name is everywhere.
Nice.
It's genius.
All right. So tell people where they can find you guys.
In Egypt, in pyramids.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, well, all the podcast related stuff can be found at brothersoftheserpent.com. That's our website, and you can find all the podcast related stuff there. The podcast itself is available on all podcasting platforms and on YouTube and Spotify and stuff like that. So just look us up, Brothers of the Serpent.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Ben at Uncharted X.
That's right. Everybody should check him out.
YouTube channel, Uncharted X. Yeah.
And what about your music? Where can people find that?
$50dynasty.com. $50 Dynasty, all spelled out.
That's right.
And we have an upcoming album. I know I've probably said this on every show.
It's been upcoming for years,
but we are in the process of booking. We just booked an awesome studio to mix. We've got the recordings done. And we are starting the mix process, which is going to be great. We did one day over at this studio just to kind of see if it was going to work out for us, and it's awesome. It is a state-of-the-art studio that we found that's hidden away just an hour away from us.
Nice.
It's really great, and the owner is awesome. So we'll be doing that, and man, I'm hoping to get this thing out this year, but I don't know.
Yeah, because once the mix down's
running
done,
out of time.
Then you got to do the mastering, and then you'll be ready, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be dropping pretty soon.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll continue talking in a Patreon segment. Thank you both so much for
Yes.
being on the show again.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, man. Always a pleasure.
This show would not be possible without the help of our Patreons. And a special thanks to those of you pledging $10 or more: Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, the 100th Monkey Project, a blue second generation MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Christine, Patricia Gayaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Christopher Ernst, Craig Cicernos, Craig Parmenter, Crystal Ann Compton, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Diona Bidwell, Dominic O'Malley, Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, Joanna Rojas, John W. Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kristen L., Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Sedgder, Stone Wilderness, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler H. Glimstead, Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Martina Saint, and Stephen D. Thank you all so very, very much. All right, well, if you liked that conversation with the Snake Brothers, there's a Patreon segment that's longer than this show, because we just kept going. And so I think it runs about an hour 36, something like that. And we talk plenty more about Egypt and the different things they found there, and I get to ask some questions that no one ever seems to be able to answer. Like in this one, when I asked about the sort of satellite pyramids, a lot of times people don't seem to really have any information on them whatsoever. Granted, they're right next to these humongous, awesome things, so they're not a big point, but I don't know. I've just always been really curious about them. And these guys were able to actually tell me. So this was cool, and I think you'll like the Patreon segment if you liked this. And if you want to become a patron, you can go to wheredidtheroadgo.com and just click on the big Patreon link, and it's only $3 a month. You get extra content all month long. This month I put up my presentation at Strange Realities, so if you didn't go to that or subscribe to that, you got that as a Patreon. There's extra little bits I try to throw in every month, some rare things that I have in my collection that aren't available anywhere else, things like that. And it helps out the show immensely. You can also make a one-time donation at the website on PayPal or Venmo or the Cash App if you just want to help out. You can also buy merch. There's t-shirts and a lot more than t-shirts. There's 2 designs from Timothy Renner and 2 designs from the late Jeff Ritzman, and you can get them on just about anything, from pillows to posters to coffee mugs, and it's all over the place. It's TeePublic. They allow you to do all kinds of stuff, so that stuff is as cheap as I can put it on there. They kind of determine the prices themselves, but they regularly put them on sale. So worth checking out, and good quality stuff that I've gotten from them anyway. And with that, I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.